The room went quiet in a way that felt heavy, almost sacred, as if the air itself had decided to stop moving. A whiteboard covered in complex equations glowed under the fluorescent lights of the executive conference room, symbols layered over symbols, the kind of problem designed not to be solved, but to remind everyone who held power. Around the table sat the sharpest minds money could buy, men and women in tailored suits with polished smiles that masked quiet panic. And at the far end of the room, unnoticed by most, stood a janitor with a mop in his hand and a past no one bothered to ask about. Before the story unfolds any further, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that no human being is ever truly invisible, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. The janitor's name was Daniel Carter, a middle-aged single father who had learned early in life how easily dreams could collapse. He had once been a promising engineering student at a small Christian university in Ohio, known for staying late in the lab and helping classmates who struggled. Faith had guided him then, a quiet certainty that hard work and humility mattered more than applause. But life had other plans. A sudden illness took his wife, medical bills swallowed their savings, and a desperate need to be present for his young daughter forced him to leave school just months before graduation. Years later, that unfinished chapter still ached like an old wound. Daniel now worked nights as a janitor in a towering Chicago tech firm called Halcyon Systems, run by its formidable CEO, Margaret Whitmore. She was brilliant, relentless, and admired in business magazines for breaking glass ceilings. What those magazines never mentioned was how deeply lonely she felt at the top. Success had demanded everything from her: family, softness, and eventually empathy. To her, people often became functions, roles, or obstacles, and those who cleaned the floors were simply part of the background. On this particular night, a crisis had erupted. Halcyon's flagship project, an AI-driven logistics platform, was failing under a mathematical bottleneck that threatened to cost the company millions. The board demanded answers by morning. Margaret summoned her executive team for an emergency session, turning the conference room into a battlefield of dry erase markers and raised voices. Stress sharpened her humor into something cruel, and when her eyes drifted toward Daniel quietly mopping near the door, she made a careless remark meant to entertain the room. She gestured toward the equations, half smiling, suggesting that if anyone could solve it, even the janitor, she would reward them. Laughter rippled, thin and uncomfortable. Daniel felt the sting, but he had learned long ago how to swallow humiliation. He kept his eyes down, focused on the floor, reminding himself why he endured nights like this. His daughter Emily slept safely at home with homework done and prayers whispered before bed. That was enough. And yet, as he moved closer to the board to clean beneath it, his eyes traced the symbols almost instinctively. The problem was flawed, not impossible, just framed incorrectly. Years of unused knowledge stirred awake like embers catching air. Inside Daniel, a quiet battle raged. He knew his place, how society had clearly labeled him. Speaking up risked ridicule, maybe even his job. But another voice, gentler and persistent, reminded him of who he once was and who he still could be. His faith had always taught him that gifts were meant to be used, not buried. With a steadying breath, he paused his mop, reached for a marker left unattended, and began to write. The room noticed not because of noise, but because of stillness. One by one, executives turned, irritation giving way to confusion. Margaret watched, first amused, then annoyed, and finally unsettled. Daniel worked methodically, his handwriting careful, his movements calm. He restructured the equation, simplified a sequence everyone else had overcomplicated, and introduced a solution that balanced efficiency with scalability. When he stepped back, the board was no longer a wall of arrogance but a clear path forward. Silence deepened. A senior analyst approached, scanning the work with widening eyes. Others followed. The solution held, not just theoretically, but elegantly. Margaret felt something unfamiliar tighten in her chest. Shock, yes, but also shame. In her pursuit of brilliance, she had forgotten how often genius hides behind unassuming faces. Daniel stood there, heart pounding, ready for dismissal or mockery. Instead, what he saw were executives reevaluating him with a mixture of awe and regret. Margaret's world shifted in that moment. The power she wielded suddenly felt hollow compared to the humility standing before her. She learned that night that leadership without compassion was a fragile illusion. In the days that followed, everything changed. Daniel was invited back, not as a janitor, but as a consultant. Records revealed his unfinished degree, his past achievements, and his quiet sacrifices. Halcyon Systems offered to fund his education so he could finally graduate. Margaret personally ensured his schedule allowed time with Emily, understanding at last that success meant little if it demanded the abandonment of love. But the transformation was not only Daniel's. Margaret began to see her employees differently. She started listening instead of commanding, asking instead of assuming. The company culture softened, productivity rose, and something rare took root: respect. Daniel never boasted, never reminded anyone of the night that changed his life. He simply worked, grateful and grounded, teaching Emily by example that dignity comes from character, not titles. As this story draws closer to its end, if it has touched your heart, even a little, please take a second to engage with this video. Like it, share it, and let us know your thoughts. Stories like this live through your support. Daniel eventually walked across a graduation stage, Emily cheering louder than anyone, her small hands clutching a handmade sign that read, "Proud of you, Dad." Margaret attended too, sitting quietly in the back, tears in her eyes as she applauded a man she once overlooked. Life did not become perfect overnight, but it became honest, rich, with purpose and connection. Before the final moments, we have one special request for you. Please comment below and tell us where you are watching from and what this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. In the end, this was never a story about a kiss or a clever equation. It was about seeing the humanity in one another, about understanding that greatness often wears work boots instead of polished shoes. It was about a janitor who refused to let his light die, and a CEO who learned that true power begins with humility. And perhaps most of all, it was a reminder that kindness, once awakened, has the power to change everything.